All right. I would like to bring in my next guest, Robert Fatina. Um, and just to give your bio, the audience, I'm not sure if I've had you on this channel. I know you've been on the radio. Robert Fatina, he is an author, journalist, and activist working for peace, social justice. He's an author of the book Settler Colonialism in Palestine and Kashmir. Robert, I think I'm mispronouncing your last name. Could you please pronounce it for me once, and I'll get it?
Fatina.
Thank you, Fatina. Okay. It kept coming out wrong. I kept saying, okay, this doesn't sound right. Fatina.
Fine.
I will warn you that they're doing construction upstairs. I did not know they were going to be doing construction upstairs. And there are moments where things get ridiculous. I am
That's
sorry
all right.
for that.
I can live with that. No problem.
But thank you for joining me, man. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
I have watched a genocide take place for the last 2 years, give or take. All of us have on social media, something that in previous instances, it just wasn't available. So people couldn't see it. Like there was no, you just get a report on something that happened. It was like, oh, that sounds bad.
Yes.
It's different when you see it. It's a very different animal. And you can even see the opinions of the United States change on this issue, even though it doesn't seem to be making a connection with reality, if that makes sense. It's like what people think doesn't, and what they're doing doesn't seem to influence them continuing to do it. That is very strange to me. And yet, that's just kind of where we are on this issue. Trump has extended this to Yemen. And he is doing this as opposed to just making a deal. He is extending it to Yemen, where he's doing the bombings and everything else. The Houthis and Ansar Allah continues their strikes in the Red Sea, despite the bombings that Trump is effectively doing. And they've been shooting down Reaper drones. I'm just giving context for the audience on this. The ICJ has extended Israel's case for 6 months for the suspected genocide, saying we will give you 6 more months to effectively answer the claim that you're committing a genocide, but we find probable cause that you are. All of this stuff is effectively taking place as Israel continues to bomb tents. I'll show in the audience video of these kids fleeing a tent after the tent has effectively been bombed, with them killing and burning people alive. Give me your take on, I don't want to say the evolution of this. I don't even know if I can ask for a solution to it, because I don't know if there is one per se, but maybe I'm wrong. Do you see an out for this? Like, do you see anything that gives you some sense of, okay, maybe there's a way for this to end? For example, Hamas has just offered a deal. We'll release all the hostages for us to end the war. Israel is not going to accept it because they don't want to end the killing. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong.
No, you're absolutely right. The agreement that was signed back in January was a 3-phase agreement. Both sides mainly adhered to it. Israel didn't entirely, although the Palestinian side did. And then the second 2 phases were to be detailed during that first phase. Well, after the end of the first phase, Israel decided they wanted to move the goalposts, as we say. They wanted to change some of the terms in the second phase. Well, any country that makes an agreement can say they want to, but they've signed onto the agreement. And if the other party in the agreement doesn't want to make the change, then they have to adhere to the agreement. Israel, of course, doesn't need to play by the rules that any other country has to play by. So it simply violated the agreement and continued its savage, unspeakably brutal bombing of the Gaza Strip, and of course accelerated its aggression in the West Bank as well. So what Hamas and Palestine is proposing is very reasonable. The release of the hostages and the complete removal of all Israeli forces from the Gaza Strip, and money to rebuild the extensive damage that has been done to housing, all the infrastructure throughout the Gaza Strip. That's very reasonable, because this was a completely disproportional response to an act of resistance that occurred in October of 2023. So as far as what I see as a resolution, this could have been resolved. The issue between Israel and Palestine could have been resolved decades ago if Israel were made to adhere to international law. That can happen by countries sanctioning Israel, cutting relations, not doing trade, certainly not sending weaponry, academic boycotts, and so on. Now, those are going on. They've been ongoing with the BDS movement for several years, but governments haven't taken this role. Am I optimistic about it happening? No, I am not. Unfortunately, I think this genocide will continue until Israel gets everything it wants, which is complete possession of Palestine. The Palestinians who remain living on their own lands will be second-class citizens, will not have the same rights as Israelis. Those that are driven out will live in refugee camps for decades, as they have been. There are people who were driven out in 1948 who were very young at that time, who are old now, living in refugee camps. Their children and grandchildren, another generation, are living in refugee camps. This is a situation that was created by the United Nations when it was newly minted in the late 40s, and the United Nations has been absolutely powerless to resolve it. And the United Nations will still not take the steps necessary to resolve this issue. And as a result, millions of Palestinians will continue to suffer.
For the United Nations itself, do they have the UN Security Council? The U.S. is going to veto anything that comes up in regards to dealing with the Israeli issue. Does the United Nations itself have the capability, meaning the UN General Assembly, to do anything in this case? The overwhelming majority of them, with the exception of like the U.S., Israel, maybe Cuba, not Cuba, like some kind of random Allen out there votes with the U.S. on this. If you have that much support, I'm talking about like 90-something% of saying we want Palestine to be a state, A, and B, what Israel is doing is outrageous. B, what is the remedy for the UN General Assembly? I mean, it can't be that disempowered over the UN Security Council, or is it?
It is very difficult for the General Assembly to take any action on itself. There are certain provisions, and I believe these provisions are being met now, but the General Assembly must actually take the steps to take those actions that are rarely allowable. But it's interesting that when we look at the United Nations, that the 15-member Security Council can act, the 190 some member General Assembly cannot. Where is there any democratic factor in this when a small minority, and that goes down to one, because the United States vetoes any action that is critical of Israel. So the United States is decreeing what over 200 other countries will do on the international stage during a genocide. There is no fairness in this. There's certainly no democracy, and there is certainly no justice in this.
It's about power. It's not about
power.
Democracy at the UN General Assembly. I mean, most people, countries, don't like to give up power. And so when those countries won that war, they cobble it together. And to your point, the other countries could pass sanctions. They don't. They could take action unilaterally. They don't. Like South Africa is being punished right now for taking Israel to the ICC court, where the U.S. is effectively going after them over doing so. So I totally get it. It's just there seems to be a reluctance to act. Now this is expanded to Yemen, because the country that decided to act, despite all of the other Arab neighbors just standing by and waving their hands, Yemen did. And they've been firing missiles saying, from here on out, no ship is going through the Red Sea, full stop. They've been knocking down, I think, 26 Reaper drones, which gets across a level of technical sophistication that you don't expect in people who are described as wearing sandals and a band of rebels, because that's the way they're described in the West. Oh, they're rebel or sandal wearing rebel. Okay, well, they're knocking down drones and they're firing missiles that are going at hypersonic speeds in Israel and in the Red Sea as a protest and as a pushback against it. Trump seems to be deciding to try to reignite a war, I'm calling it, quote, civil war, in order to either destabilize or at the very least remove the power structure that is in Yemen. Because despite their proclamations of we have done great things in stopping the Houthis, they have not. Explain that to us, just so we have some context of what is taking place in Yemen right now.
There are a number of things. First, I want to comment on something you said earlier about how countries are hesitant to sanction Israel. Ireland was going to sanction Israel until the U.S. threatened it. So that's just one example. Again, the United States using its power in very unjust and very unfair ways to maintain that power. But as far as what's happening in Yemen, and the United States' a bombing of Yemen, which was, as you mentioned, ineffective. And the Yemeni army has gotten much more powerful over the last several years, as it initially fought the war mainly against Saudi Arabia, and then there's been truce for a number of years. But it has grown in its strength and its technological abilities, as you mentioned, by the shooting down drones and so on. And the Yemeni army has been able to block seagoing vessels in the Red Sea, and made that something that has blocked that trade there. So the United States now is seeing a threat to its power in the Middle East. It wants itself and Israel to be the only powerhouses in that part of the country. And as Yemen is increasing its power, because by blocking the Red Sea, this is major. This is a big deal for the many economies of the world. So the United States sees its power threatened and will do what's necessary to maintain that power. And if that means supporting rebels in Yemen who are opposing the Houthi government and who support the previous very repressive government, then they will do so. The United States will support that. The bombing has not been effective. It has been more performative than effective. People can, the Trump and his courts can say, "Oh, we're taking action. We're bombing Yemen." They're killing innocent people, but they aren't preventing the interruption of the trade in the Red Sea. And that's all they're interested in. They're not interested in human life. They're interested in power and profits. So their desire or their intent to go back and support a civil war in Yemen and to foster that and foment it and see countless numbers of people suffer and die is part of their plan to maintain their power. And this, Jamal, is consistent with the U.S. government from the past. Look what they did in Iran, in Afghanistan, a generation ago in Vietnam, a generation before that in North Korea. It goes on. And I've only touched on some of the more well-known cases where the United States has supported revolutions against democratic elected governments, or has overthrown democratic elected governments and killed millions of people. It's estimated that the United States, since the end of World War II, is responsible for over 20 million deaths in the world. That's no other country has that disgraceful a record.
You know what's wild about it, though? You can do that if you have enough propaganda to say you're freedom and justice and love and light, and you can get your population to believe it. The problem is the mask is off. And so it's being done nakedly in a way that is difficult to count by its own citizenry. You know, when I tell my mom that, she's shocked. Like, I don't use the 20 million. I just tell her, when you are doing international politics and you're evaluating it, life doesn't matter. Like, you're evaluating what people are doing and the reasons that they're doing it. But when they're looking at that stuff and making decisions on what they do for political power, life is not included in that, which for a regular person is kind of hard to accept. Like, it's like, what do you mean life doesn't matter? It's like, dude, okay, well, what about this? What about this? What about this? Do you believe life mattered in all of these cases where these people were being killed? It didn't. It's astonishing to me.
And that's, if I just come, and that's, as you said, life doesn't matter. And the mask is off because people don't have to rely on what MSNBC and Fox News are telling them. They're seeing in real time. They're seeing these burning children, these tents going up in flames, and hearing the people scream, and they know something is radically wrong here. So, as you said, the mask is off. Now, you mentioned propaganda. As you know, I wrote a book on U.S. propaganda a few years ago, and it's easy to fool the people when you're their only source of information. But now, the people who are actually suffering are providing us with information, and we know what's happening.
But it doesn't seem to be connecting. And maybe it takes time to, like, between the inception of information coming through, what people can see, and their opinions changing. It's like, oh my God, this is horrible. Into some kind of political connection to it. I don't know. It's just, you get like half, if not more, of this country saying this is a genocide. Like, flat out. you get a Democratic Party who can't even mention the word. I just showed the video of Sanders getting booed because I'm dodgy about that word. And it's like the ICJ, Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, all of these organizations are, this is a genocide. This is horrendous. ICJ saying it's plausible, but they're looking into it. I don't know. It's difficult accounts being a part of a country that is paying 70 to 80% for the mass killing of women and children. And your tax dollars are going into it. You are a party to it just because you're part of the country that is doing it. And neither political party, both for the most part, will have the same policy. Democrats may not deport people, but okay, thanks for that. But everything else, like Tim Walz was asked on MSNBC, and he couldn't even articulate how he would be different. He just said, well, people can obviously see we'd be different. Nobody may believe that, but we are. Without articulating how.
Right. Yeah.
How's your policy different?
Yeah.
It's very frustrating.
And this goes back to what we talked about earlier, power and profits. Most of the members of Congress, both the House of Representatives and the Senate, rely on campaign donations from pro-Israeli lobbies to fund their campaigns. And we're talking hundreds of millions of dollars over the years that have been invested. Yeah. The largest person as of a couple of years ago, or the person who received the most donations, was Joe Biden. So as president, he said, after Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch and all these others said this was genocide, he said, we don't see it as genocide. But he wouldn't say what information the government has, the U.S. government has, that Amnesty doesn't have or that Human Rights Watch doesn't have, because he knew who he was beholden to, not the voters of the United States. He's beholden to the lobbies that had supported him all those years and that support his fellow Democrats and Republicans in the U.S. government. So until that stranglehold that Israeli lobbies have on U.S. politicians, we're not going to see significant change.
Can we step into Israel for a moment? You would think that there would be a massive amount of political instability with this level of the war. And what's wild about it, there is. So some of the reporting that was coming out of Israel had, in fact, there were multiple reports. There were some reports talking about how the troops were effectively breaking down because they kept going into Gaza over and over and over. And they kept meeting resistance, and they didn't necessarily know when somebody would get killed. Like, even to the point of using human shields themselves, like putting them on vehicles and riding in front with the idea that if we get attacked, we're going to kill the Palestinians first. Now, one of the interesting things that came out had to do with, where is it? Where they were talking about the number of Israeli troops that just couldn't function. Either they were call-outs. You had the religious issue where many ultra-Orthodox Jews decided, we're not doing it. Netanyahu effectively backed him in that for his own political reasons. Israel sends undertrained soldiers into Gaza amid significant manpower shortage. They were even talking about like 40% calling out. So they don't want to do military service, or they're pulling out of military service. How long can they keep this up functionally, even as a state? I remember Dan Kincaid. Is that right? Daniel Kincaid. I think I might be getting his name wrong. But he was talking about how internally there are contradictions, pressures within the Israeli government. A, they've been fighting a war for X number of years. B, they've been expanding into the countries that they've been going. I mean, you need troops in order to expand into these countries while suffering a manpower shortage simultaneously. And then you get to stuff like internal politics, like the budget, for example. Okay, how do you support your country when many of the people are off to war? And one last part, criminality with Netanyahu. So Yair Lapid came out and effectively said, there will be Jews killing Jews if we don't do something about this. Now, what he's referring to is the head of Shin Bet being fired by Netanyahu, and the courts coming in, blocking Netanyahu from doing that because they were investigating criminality dealing with Qatargate stuff. I'm not going fully into the Qatargate, but the internal pressures to Israel itself. How is the state maintaining its integrity with all of this going on simultaneously? And maybe this is the wrong question to ask, but this is the way I'm going with it to step into it.
No, I think it's a very good question because we aren't hearing a lot about the things that you've mentioned in the so-called mainstream media, but whatever you want to call it. But the Israeli economy is suffering because of what's happening. There is wide dissent. People are demanding a deal with Palestine so that the hostages can be returned. And they're saying that in major demonstrations in Tel Aviv, people are saying that Netanyahu is only prolonging the war for his own political survival, because as you said, he's under indictment for several serious charges. So there's that corruption there. Then the fact that many soldiers are not returning, and many soldiers are speaking out about what they did in Gaza, and they're saying this was wrong. They're saying what I did was wrong as a soldier, and they're saying I'm not the only one who feels this way. That this is fairly widespread. So the morale of the military is very low. There's dissent in the country. There's disagreement about how to proceed with this war. Now, I do want to say that there are many, and probably the majority of Israelis cheer every time a Palestinian dies, but there are pro-Palestinian Israelis. There are several organizations. They're not very well known, but they do exist, and they do good within the occupied Palestine territories. But the chaos in the government now and the instability of it can't be sustained. Now, Netanyahu and his cabinet, I'm sure, believe that whatever difficulties they have, the United States will bail them out. If it's financial, the United States will send them more money in addition to the $4 billion it sends them every year. If they don't have sufficient soldiers, and this is a big question, will the United States send U.S. troops into Gaza? Now, I think the U.S. people would object to that strongly. I think many other countries in the world would object to that, but I don't think the Trump administration would consider that off the table. It wants Israel to get whatever it wants. Trump has talked about the prime real estate that the Gaza Strip could create, which is just, it's so it's beyond callous. People are suffering. Men, women, children, babies are being slaughtered, and he's talking about building resorts on their blood and on their bones. So how Israel will sustain this, and remember, Israel is still is still occasionally bombing Lebanon. It's threatening Iran. It's threatening Yemen. It's bombing Syria. This is a rogue country, totally out of control, and it's ignoring its internal workings, and that's not sustainable.
They seem to think it is. Like, that's the rub, right? I mean, from their point of view, we're taking Gaza. From their point of view, we're taking the West Bank. From their point of view, we're going to take parts of Syria. Nothing stops us. Assad is gone.
Mhm.
They're making deals with Turkey to effectively carve up Syria. Meaning all of this stuff takes manpower. And if you're only a country of 8 million people, and you're expanding outward in a way where, okay, who's going to do the labor? Who's going to man the stores? Who's going to ensure that, like, these are all basic things of state that need to take place that require manpower in a country with very little people in context to, other countries. It just seems, like you said, unsustainable. And yet, Netanyahu's like, keep going. So, like that, in fact, that article that I showed you was pointing out that they were using undertrained soldiers because so many had been called out. Like you had, I think that thing said like 100,000 or something. Basically, 40% said we don't want to do this. We're out. We don't want to do this anymore. This is not good. We don't like it. We don't like the military service. We want out. Ultra Orthodox Jews, they had that fight because they were trying to get them into the military. Netanyahu didn't want them in the military, so they're out. So you're having these blocks of people as they occupy all of this land and push into further territories, trying to create this greater Israel. Like I said, it just seems unsustainable, and yet they sustain it and they keep going. What is the goal? I kept asking that. What is the goal? Like, unless you're going to exterminate 1 million, 2 million Palestinians in Gaza, then what are you doing? That's the part that I don't quite get. I don't see the end game. Is the end game a single state called Israel where all of the West Bank and Gaza is included? But if that's the case, then you're going to have an apartheid state because you got to deal with the fact that you're a minority in your own country. Like, what am I missing here? What's the objective ultimately?
Well, the objective, as you mentioned, is uh, an entire Israel state incorporating all of Palestine. And you said, are they willing to kill 1 or 2 million Palestinians? Yes, they are. They have shown no restraint in killing over 50,000 already in the last 18 months. They're willing to, there's talk about refugee camps in Egypt and in other nearby countries, and pushing the Palestinians there, forbidding them from ever coming back. So that's just eliminating that problem. So either kill them or expel them from the country, and then have this greater Israel. But as you said, if they don't kill all the Palestinians in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, which the Israeli government would be perfectly happy doing that, it seems to me, then they're going to have to be dealing with millions of people who are not Israelis. They don't want Israeli citizenship. They want their own country. They know what the international law says, that as far as the borders of what their own country should be, although we can talk about how unfair the initial partition plan was. That's probably a conversation for a different day. But what Netanyahu wants to do, and what his cabinet is very racist, right-wing cabinet wants to do, is create a greater Israel encompassing all that land. And as you said, it'll be an apartheid state, as it is now, where there's a separate set of rules for Israelis and Jews, and where they fall under civil law, and but the Palestinians and the Arabs within those borders fall under military law. So if an Israeli commits a crime and a Palestinian commits the exact same crime, they go to different laws. They have a different set of rules that apply to them. If this isn't apartheid, I don't know what is. So the whole plan, whatever the plan is, to take over all of the occupied Palestinian territories, again, it's not going to work. It's not going to bring peace to the Middle East. It's certainly not going to bring security to the people of Israel. It's just going to continue the problems that have been ongoing for over 70 years, and that have been so greatly accelerated in the last 18 months.